Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. The academic procession will now begin, and we are pleased to present to you today's honorees.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. My name is Allan Levene, and I am privileged to be the chairman of the Board of Trustees of this vital institution, the Jewish Theological Seminary. On behalf of the board, the administration, and the faculty, I'm delighted to welcome you all here today to JTS and for this special convocation. I'm very pleased to be joined today on the bima by Professor Arnold Eisen, Chancellor of JTS, and by Mr. Steve Kerbel, President of the Jewish Educators Assembly. I would also like to extend a special welcome to Dr. Paul Finkelman, President of Gratz College in Philadelphia, one of our sister institutions. Thank you for being here. Allow me to begin by thanking Jacob Sandler, the wonderful musician who accompanied today's processional. We're proud to note that Jacob is a student in the H.L. Miller Cantorial School. Before we start with the program, if you'd all just make sure that your iPhones or whatever device you use is on silent mode, we'll add to the afternoon's events. Anna Silverman, who's also a student in the H.L. Miller Cantorial School, will now lead us in the Star Spangled Banner and Hatikva.
So proudly we
Please be seated. Thank you, Anna. I actually get the privilege of listening to her daven Musaf every once in a while, so you had a treat. And I don't know about you, but those two anthems are sung. It always gives me goosebumps. Anyway, today's convocation is a big deal. We're conferring honorary degrees, and they represent a milestone in the careers of those that are seated here. These leaders are devoted to our traditions and our people. Individually and as part of our movement and communities, they have helped meet the educational and religious needs of today's Jews. Importantly, these honorees also help prepare the way for a flourishing future. The broad and meaningful contribution of these individuals are reflected in the composition of today's audience. In addition to proud family members, we are also joined today by lay leaders of the schools and organizations served by our honorees. Your presence is especially welcomed as it is a natural outgrowth of the respect for the honorees and for their efforts on behalf of the Jewish community. This ceremony, by its very nature, signifies the commitment of JTS, particularly through our William Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education, and of the Jewish Educators Assembly, the professional association of educators and educational administrators of the conservative movement, to advancing the quality of Jewish education and broadening the scope of Jewish educators so that they may respond to the educational needs of contemporary Jewish life and society. Jewish education is a partnership. We are in it together. That is why I'm so pleased that joining us on the bima this afternoon is Mr. Steve Kerbel, President of the Jewish Educators Assembly. We welcome you, sir. Thank you, and thank the JEA for being an important part of today's events. By paying tribute to the educational leaders we are honoring today, we hope to recognize publicly the importance of the ideals of Jewish education to which all JEA members have dedicated their lives. And it now gives me great pleasure to call upon Mr. Kerbel to share a few words of greeting.
Shalom, shalom, larachok v'lakarov amar Adonai. Welcome to those from afar and to those who are near, said Adonai. Many of us are welcomed with these words of Isaiah to begin the solemn service of Kol Nidre. We are also gathered here today from near and from far for a solemn event, the recognition of our 13 educator colleagues for their lifelong bodies of work, sharing the light of Torah. Like Yom Kippur, there is a lighter aspect of the day, after all the confessing is done, when the expression of our rabbis is of a Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim when we express our joy, excitement, and pride, as we do today in our show of admiration for our colleagues and friends celebrating a significant career achievement. The Jewish Educators Assembly, the Professional Association of Conservative Movement Educators, is proud to partner with the Jewish Theological Seminary in welcoming all of you as we honor the accomplishments of these distinguished Jewish educators. Bruchim habayim.
Thank you for enriching today's ceremony with your thoughts and with your presence. The esteemed faculty, members of JTS's William Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education, are involved in developing new methods, perspectives, and materials to strengthen the Jewish educational enterprise, working together with leading educators in the field, such as those that we are honoring today with these degrees. To give you a sense of the exciting, innovative work being done here at JTS, I am now pleased to call upon Dr. Shear Epstein, Assistant Professor of Jewish Education. Please welcome her.
Mazel tov to all the honorees. We talked in my pedagogy and teaching practicum today about how we need to work extra hard in the field of education to step into and claim the roles of experts with knowledge. You're all being honored because you embody the role of expert, and I am honored to be with you today. At the JEA Yomi Yoon here at JTS 3 years ago, and some of you might have been here, I talked about gender and Jewish education. I started off the learning session by sharing that when I facilitate workshops and presentations on this subject, that I cart along a stack of Newsweeks, Time magazines, and other media interests from the past 30 years. I displayed some of the cover stories throughout the years to underscore the cyclical nature of who and what our culture frames as requiring immediate attention and intervention when it comes to gender issues. In the early 90s, the focus was on girls at risk, the pressing need for single-sex education and ensuring that young women would not lose their voices. Simultaneously, news outlets such as New York Times Magazine headlined the date rape crisis on college campuses and the critical demand of teaching about consent in the 90s. The next phase highlighted boys at risk on a rapid free fall through the system and the burning necessity to save them through specialized programming, like in this Newsweek cover story. The early aughts spotlighted teens and sex, and tales rapidly circulated of promiscuity at b'nai mitzvahs. Mean girls and bullying epidemics also garnered focus. The most recent focus that I highlighted in my 2015 JEA session centered around safe spaces for gender nonconforming teens in camps, schools, youth groups, and synagogues. The cycle continues. Since then, Me Too landed. The Me Too movement has rightfully rattled and awoken our educational leaders to the immediacy of addressing gender-based violence. And here we are, back at girls at risk in a very different way. Suddenly, we are all talking about power. It is hot. It is all the rage. The New York Magazine, Powerful Women Talk About Power. The New York Times Magazine, She Said on Power and Sex in the Workplace. Prisma, a Jewish day school network, put out a request for proposals on power and privilege for their upcoming publication. The Jewish Futures Conference is about power to the people. This has become the new buzzword in general and Jewish education alike, power. My concern is that we are not looking closely at how we are defining power and often not considering why we are using the word in our conferences and publications. Is it just the latest fad? And if so, are we missing opportunities for lasting change in the ways that we educate in Jewish settings? In my teaching, I amplify that power is fluid, in contrast to how it is often framed. Some have it and some don't, as static, unchanging, and set. And I maintain that we need to teach kids to talk about power in tandem with another very important word, status. The power we hold in relation to others. The inclusion of the word status helps us to consider power in the context of relationships, power as ever-shifting and changing, power as connected to the ability and or the desire to engage in controlling or coercive behavior. I've been highlighting this in my curriculum work, my writing, and my teaching for over 20 years. Today, it feels even more pressing and relevant. The Hagar-Sarai relationship is text that I have consistently used for introducing the language of status. We read it just a few weeks ago in Shul, in Bereshit. V'Sarai eshet Avram lo yadalo v'lashivcha mitzrit ushma Hagar. And we know that Sarai could not have a child, and she took her maid Hagar the Egyptian and gave to her husband Avram. He cohabited with Hagar and she conceived, and it says, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her eyes. I find this text to be very helpful. It demonstrates wonderfully the ways in which status is movable, can shift very quickly. Sarai clearly is the mistress who has the power to give over her maidservant Hagar to bear her son. However, once Hagar is pregnant, Sarai is lowered in her eyes. It no longer matters that being a wife is a higher status role. Hagar's swelling belly causes Sarai to feel inadequate, less than. We know what happens next. She is aggressive, abusive, and at times violent towards Hagar. I suggest that prior to moving to that part of the narrative, we dwell for a while upon this description, that she was lowered in her eyes. The text and many others in our stories enable us to talk about a whole lot. Who in Jewish circles is often considered to have higher status? Here, those who are fertile. Power and control cycles, Sarai as abusive, and to examine status as shifting and changing. Jealousy and fear can lead us to take desperate measures to keep the status quo. We have an opportunity with young people to consider, when people perceive that they are higher status or privileged, how might that impact the ways that they choose to treat others they see as lower? Last spring, I developed and taught a new Davidson course. It was called For You Were Strangers, Multicultural Pedagogy in Jewish Education. We know well that we are mandated as Jews to welcome in the stranger, those who are considered lower status. Davidson learners shared throughout our time together the messiness of engaging in this work on the ground, in our classrooms, in our teaching. It is challenging to recognize who is on the inside and who is on the margins. We extended this conversation to include the ways that we, as Jewish educators and leaders, seek ways to build inclusive communities, as well as how our learners of all ages and stages and backgrounds can reflect on their own roles in participating in caring, safe, welcoming learning settings. The voices we hear, the voices we might not get to hear. And being honest about the times that perhaps the loudest voices have become the only heard voices in our classrooms. When those who have felt lower status because of their gender, sexual orientation, family structure, socioeconomic status in our learning settings, and perhaps as a result not fully present in the learning. Sarai and Hagar, among many other status pairs in our stories, offer us the opportunity to talk about what is often uncomfortable but so important, status and power. As we make our way through Bereshit, I encourage you to consider how would you use some of these upcoming stories of family dysfunction to talk about shifting status? As we engage in this language with young people, we are ensuring that power will not be just another buzzword in Jewish education. Thank you, and Mazal Tov.
Thank you, Dr. Epstein, for those important words. I now have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing to you the Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary and President of its faculties, Professor Arnold M. Eisen.
Thanks, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you all here today, and an honor to speak to an assembly including some of the great Jewish educators of our generation. One of the things that makes me proudest of JTS is the move that Solomon Schechter made by establishing the Teachers Institute. Just think of it. Several years after he assembled some of the greatest scholars in the world, founding a new seminary, teach a new kind of rabbi for a new kind of Jewish community, he realizes that the effort isn't complete unless he has Jewish educators. And you know, Schechter was kind of upset when the BJE was formed because he wanted JTS to be the BJE. He wanted us to be the Board of Jewish Education of New York. He thought that was a function that we could have performed, and that it was duplication to have a BJE outside of JTS because he didn't, as you know, want to form a denominational institution only training conservative rabbis or conservative educators. He wanted to train rabbis and educators for America. In the event, it didn't happen. But what Schechter did do, in a brilliant move, was name Mordechai Kaplan the head of the Teachers Institute, thereby giving it a kind of a character which transcended some of the character of the rest of JTS. For instance, I was happily told by graduates of the Teachers Institute that whereas in the rabbinical school they were speaking English all the time, In TI, they were speaking Hebrew, right? TI was a much more Zionist institution than the rabbinical school was. These differences carried forward, and we have a non-denominational Davidson School of Jewish Education. I had the pleasure of telling Bill Davidson the very first time I met him, which was literally days after I was appointed chancellor, and I met Bill and I said to him, thank you very much for establishing the school, making sure that the Teachers Institute legacy would carry on for many decades to come, because if JTS did not have a school of education, I don't think I would have wanted to be its chancellor. Because what can we do in this country, in this situation, in this culture, in this society, without a healthy, vibrant field of Jewish education? And the JTS would be incomplete if we were not sending some of the great Jewish educators out into the world. So what I wanted to do this morning, in a few minutes, this afternoon, in the few minutes that remain me, is the following. I had the good fortune of being good friends with one of the great Jewish educators of this generation, the late Jonathan Wucher, who passed away about a year and a half ago, literally weeks after JTS awarded him an honorary degree. And I had the pleasure of serving with Jonathan Wucher on the Covenant Foundation Board of Directors for many years. And I not only read all the articles that John wrote about Jewish education, which is a considerable bibliography, as you know, but I got to hear John give Divrei Torah and talk to John about Torah on numerous occasions. So I thought I would do today is, in John's memory, talk a little bit about the educational implications of this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, and see what we can learn from it about the issues that face Jewish education and the strengths that are ours when we try to overcome the problems that we face. So here a brief Dvar Torah about Vayetze, focused on Jewish education in honor of today's honorees and in memory of Jonathan Wucher. So first, of course, we start the portion with the episode that every Jewish educator has talked about on numerous occasions. It's one of the most inspiring and beautiful moments in the Torah, when Jacob sees this ladder, this stairway to heaven, you might call it, and comes to this realization, which, if you've been an educator, you've had the pleasure of having someone come to under your tutelage, that God is in this place and we didn't know. And there's a sense of awe and mystery and amazement. And I think I'm looking at the educators, you've all made this point that the Hebrew says yada, which is the word for knowledge that has to do with personal experience and personal acquaintance. So we're not talking about a person arriving at a philosophical understanding that there is divinity in the world. We're talking about some personal experience of God, a religious experience. The world is awesome. Heschel would say it's ineffable. There's more to this life than we could comprehend. And in Heschel's word, this is not a moment of theology. This is a moment of depth theology, right? This is a moment of personal experience, and it's a high point in the life. And more than mind is involved, heart and soul are involved. And any Jewish educator, I think, knows and tries to teach through their teaching that more than mind is involved in Jewish commitment. If there's not heart there and there's not soul there, you're missing something really important. But there's another thing about this episode that many Jewish educators in our day would not stress, namely that Jacob's encounter with God, like every other encounter in the Torah, comes in the midst of the history of a particular family, in the midst of a particular history. God tells Jacob that God is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. And I think I'm being fair to Torah. I really think this is solid pshat here and not any drash on my part. The Torah believes in particularism as well as universalism. And without making any overgeneralizations, let's say that one of the hard parts of doing Jewish education in 21st century United States of America is that the overwhelming tendency is toward universalism and away from particularism. And particularism is derided as, at best, tribalism or chauvinism or even racism. And God forbid you should speak about anything unique to the Jewish people and its heritage. But what we have to do is find universal lessons in our history and talk only about the universal lessons and not talk about how they're grounded in the history and community of a particular people. And to me, that is in direct contradiction to the educational philosophy of this week's Torah portion, which has Jacob reaching a universal lesson. God is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob only. God is the God of humanity. But he reaches this universal lesson in the context of a particular family, in the midst of a particular history, and that's the way the Torah wants to do it from beginning to end. It wants to make Jewish education a process that unfolds for human being in a particular language, in a particular culture, bearing the lessons that come to us because we're part of the history that we're part of and not some other history. I think that the latter story, therefore, points to something really, really crucial about Jewish education in our day and the challenges we face. And I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet, but I think it's fair to say that the future of the Jewish community in this country, the future of the fulfillment of Schechter's hopes for Judaism in America, rests on whether we can find this balance between the universal in particular and convince ever new generations to choose for this balance and not choose either the totally particular, which means ghettoizing yourselves apart from the rest of the world, or the entirely universal, which means that your tradition is a nice sentimental thing you tried out at holidays for a little bit, but not a serious matter to direct your life. If the latter gives us a welcome sense of the aspiration, the possibility that human beings have, that we can actually be touched by the divine. We can actually reach beyond ourselves. We can actually live in a world of ideals. We can, as we say, reach for the stars, that we can be in contact with these angels going up and down the ladder. The next thing that happens in the story is a bit of reality testing. A bit of that I think would be welcome to every Jewish educator, because it teaches us that the Torah is aware of the fact that when we do Jewish education, we are dealing with real human beings, not with angels. I happen to love this particular story for this very reason. So here's Jacob. He's just had this incredible religious experience. He recognizes that God is in this place and he does not know. And the very first thing that our ancestor Jacob does is cut a deal with God. It's great. He cuts a deal. If you give me the food I need, and if you give me the clothing I need, and if you bring me back here safe and in one piece, I'll give you a tenth of what you give me. I'll give you a tenth. Now, we have to admit that most of us don't tithe. So a tenth is a lot for a human being to dedicate to God. But on the other hand, it's direct evidence of, you might call it, the humanness. Nietzsche said the human, all too human character of these human beings that we're dealing with. And so Jacob has just been given everything by God, and promised more, and says if he gets everything you could possibly imagine, he'll be generous enough to give God a tenth of it and keep 90% for himself. That is so human. That's so wonderful. I would almost say that's so Jewish, but in this respect, we're very like everybody else. It's not because we're more so, we're like everybody else, only more so. So you know when you teach students that they have other things on their laptops at that moment than your lesson plan. They're not just doing Safari on their phones. They're doing other things. They have other dreams than to be a highly educated Jew. They have other plans than to master this particular homework assignment. They have other urges, especially if they're teenagers. Their hormones are active. They're not just full of the urge to contact God and be a better Jewish human being. And yet, we reach them. We do. And we turn, if we're really good educators, we turn these hormones, we turn these aspirations directly to the benefit of our community and the highest selves that these people can be. And Jacob does become Israel. He does become a better self. He does learn. He actually is able to say thank you to God after a time, and we know that students can learn too. One final word on the Parsha. You know, the Parsha ends with this brief note at the end. There's almost this kind of standalone paragraph where Jacob and Laban separate, and Jacob goes his way, and the messengers of God, the Malachim there, once more encounter him. And he acknowledges their presence. This is God's camp, he says, and he calls the place Machanaim, which is a foreshadowing of his camp against Esau's camp, but for the moment, it seems to mean his camp and God's camp, two camps. In the very first verse of the next Parsha, Vayishlach, he's going to send messengers, Malachim of his own, ahead with greetings for his brother Esau. So the educational lesson for our time that I'm going to draw from this is that Jewish education is enriched and made immensely more difficult by the fact that Jews now live in very complex families. Every family, and I'm not typing this as Jacob the good brother and Esau the bad brother. Let's just say they're different, and their heritages are different, and their marriages are different, and their children are different. And this is now a majority of the Jewish families, by a long shot, that we have in the United States of America today. And even if we don't have non-Jews in our intimate nuclear families, we have non-Jews in our friendship circles and at work, et cetera, and we have all sorts of people that we're in contact with all the time, including people who think that Jewish loyalty and identity is a ridiculous thing to try to perpetuate. We have people angry at religion and angry at God. Many of our families contain people like that. And how are you going to proceed with Jewish education when these are the obstacles you face? And now we know, if we didn't know it before, we know that anti-Semitism is alive and well in the United States of America, which also complicates the job of a Jewish educator, of course. It was always there in the background, and kids were somewhat aware of it. But you can't allow yourself much degree of denial anymore. And so we Jewish educators are going to have to answer the question, why be Jewish? Why cast your lot with the 1.7% of America instead of the 98-point-something%? Why cast your lot with the 15 million Jews in the world instead of the 7 billion non-Jews in the world? And you have to answer that question convincingly, and now you have to do it with all of these complicated matters. You don't just have Jacob, and Jacob alone is so complicated. Look at Jacob's family, right? Complicated enough without considering Esau's side of the family as well. I treasure the fact, in conclusion, that Jacob does confront the challenges. We have a Torah that does not let us escape challenges. The Torah gives us real human beings caught up in real historical situations that we recognize, encountering a God who's impossible to figure out, who often makes demands you can't possibly meet. And this is our ancestor, and we, the children of Israel, are caught in a very similar, or blessed with a very similar educational situation to this day. Ele Toldot Yaakov, we're going to read in a couple weeks, Yosef. I love those words. Ele Toldot Yaakov Yosef. The story of Jacob is Joseph. Our stories don't start where we do. This perhaps is one of the most fundamental lessons that a Jewish educator teaches, one of the most countercultural lessons, I believe, in 21st century United States of America. You were born into a history. Your story did not start with you, and your story will not end with you if you walk a path that the Jewish people has walked for thousands of years. I think that we're going to win, actually, this battle with the culture because our tradition is so strong. We have survived many curses in our history. I believe we can profit from blessing and not just from curse. And the product that we're offering people, the combination of meaning and community that we're holding out to them through Jewish education is so deep and so rich and so beautiful that I have no doubt that it's going to last. We may lose on numbers from time to time. The Jewish people has never won if you count numbers. We have not survived 3,000 years by winning on numbers. But as Krochmal tried to argue in his great book, Moren V'Uchei Azman, the guide for the perplexed at the time, we win because we are in touch with something absolute, something eternal, something true that resonates in the heart and souls and minds of human beings. I think that's the mission of Jewish education, and that is what makes me an optimist, that blessed with really good educators like we're honoring today, this mission is going to succeed. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to turn now to the conferring of the honorary degrees, and I'm going to depart from the script to beg your forgiveness. If we get to a certain point and you see me walk out, it's because I am doing Mariv at a Shiva tonight in Long Island. So I have to get to the middle of Long Island by a certain point to do Mariv, and so I may have to leave, depending on how things go, a little bit early. But I hope that that won't be the case, and I'm really happy to have the honor of conferring honorary degrees on a series of people who have long and distinguished careers behind them, people who've left their mark on hundreds of students and certainly on the communities in which they've worked. The honorary degrees which will be awarded today have been approved by the JTS Board of Trustees. So it's now my privilege to confer these honorary degrees, and assisting me with the honoring of our Jewish educators will be Dean Bill Robinson of the William Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education. Bill, thank you for coming forward, and who will read brief citations of the candidates. As each candidate is announced, I ask that he or she come forward to receive the degree. I now call to the podium Mrs. Catherine Berkowitz. Kathy.
Mrs. Berkowitz, you joined B'nai Torah Congregation in Boca Raton in 2004 as Education Director after serving as Education and Program Director of Beth Shalom Synagogue in Memphis. In 1997, you became the founding faculty member of Camp Ramah Darom and have served as the Rosh Chinuch Director of Education for the last 20 summers. In addition, you have represented the camp at national conferences. You earned a Master of Arts in Public Administration with a concentration in education from Brooklyn College and studied Jewish education at Siegel College in Cleveland. You chair the Education Directors Council of South Palm Beach County, and you are a board member and past vice president of the JEA. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people. Mazel tov.
Cantor Larry I. Brandspiegel.
Cantor Brandspiegel. You have been serving as a Jewish spiritual and educational role model for over 36 years, currently at the East Brunswick Jewish Center in New Jersey. As an education director, your vision and pride in your personal connection to Judaism has allowed you to inspire and guide the younger generation as well as congregation members. As a cantor, your melodic voice and musical interpretations have brought unity and a sense of spiritual high to the prayer services that you lead. Your commitment to doing Gimilut Chasadim, deeds of loving kindness, has provided senior members the opportunity to stay Jewishly connected. Finally, your continuous involvement in the JEA has exemplified your leadership qualities and has motivated others to work on its behalf. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people. Mazel tov.
Ms. Yaffa Fuchs.
Ms. Fuchs, during your long career, first as a teacher and later as an educational director of Congregation Beth El in Voorhees, New Jersey for 27 years, you have impacted the lives of 1,000+ students. Your innovative programming and leadership skills earned your school the USCJ Framework for Excellence, and your family education activities and Project Lev, a special needs program, merited prestigious Solomon Schechter Gold Awards. You expanded adult education and brought technology and training to your staff. You served as president of the Mid-Atlantic JA and now serve on its national board. In the words of your rabbi, you saw the spark of holiness in every Jewish child, treating each as if he or she were your own. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Mr. Barry M. Gruber.
Mr. Gruber, throughout your 20 years in Jewish education, you have been a change agent. First at Temple Bethel in Rochester, New York, then at Talmud Torah of Minneapolis, and now at Temple Shalom in Greenwich, Connecticut. Your career has been marked by bringing many unique innovations to religious schools, seeking major changes in delivery models, curricula, engagement, experiential education, and more. In addition, you have started a Jewish preschool, taught adult courses, and developed graduate Melton courses. With your driving philosophy that Jewish education must be serious and fun, and with your ability to connect with young and old alike, you have had a major impact on making Judaism relevant and important to a new generation. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Mr. Avi Samuel Halstone.
Mr. Halsell, head of school, CEO of Denver Jewish Day School, where you are in your 12th year, you have moved the school to a position of strength. One of your many passions is instilling in your students a deep connection with the land and people of Israel. You have led countless student trips to Israel and are most proud of the groundbreaking 6-week 10th grade Hebrew immersion program in Israel that is a cornerstone of your school. You have worked tirelessly to bring innovation and innovative education to the day schools and synagogue schools that you have led. Your greatest satisfaction is being part of a family that has always been dedicated to Jewish day school education, and thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Mrs. Terry Rube Hochberg.
Mrs. Hochberg, you have been director of education at Cleveland's Park Synagogue for 23 years. When you began, in addition to leading the Sunday and Shabbat school, you reintroduced a weekday religious school and invigorated the upper school. You opened up Jewish learning to adults with cognitive disabilities. A strong believer in educating the entire family, you have led high holiday family services and intergenerational programs. You have taught numerous professional development courses and served as a guest lecturer at a Jesuit university. You have also served on the JAA board. And your father was ordained at JTS 66 years ago. And we are so glad that he is here with us today. At the time of your bat mitzvah, JTS Chancellor Louis Finkelstein, with remarkable prescience, wished for you years of dedicated service to the Jewish people, and thank you for that.
Mrs. Marcia Kashdan.
Mrs. Kashdan, for 21 years you have been educational director of the Jewish Community Center of Paramus, Congregational Bet Tikva in New Jersey, creating innovative and compelling programs for students, their families, and the synagogue community. You chaired the Bergen County Principals Council and were instrumental in creating and is the director of the Kehila program, which brings together students from 10 congregations for dynamic educational activities. You are honored by the Bergen County High School of Jewish Studies as Educator of the Year and actively serve on its board. Talented in both formal and informal educational settings, you are also youth director of the local Kadima and US-wide chapter. You have successfully pursued multiple avenues to strengthen Jewish identities and enhance Jewish lives. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Ms. E. Tema Kingsley.
Ms. Kingsley, or as I usually say, Tema. After earning degrees at the University of Pennsylvania and New York University, you taught and or directed at the Forest Hills Jewish Center, Community Synagogue of Port Washington, and Hillcrest Jewish Center, all in New York. You encouraged a love of Judaism and Jewish living, and Jewish values dictated classroom practice. You became an early childhood consultant at New York's Board of Jewish Education. You were president of the Jewish Early Childhood Association of New York and the National Jewish Early Childhood Network, and champion education, especially early childhood education, at United Synagogue and UJA Federation of New York. You joke about being a one-issue candidate because Jewish early childhood education isn't just your most important cause, it's your only cause. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Causing trouble, Eddie. Mrs. Cheryl Rosenberg Klein.
Mrs. Klein, you began your journey at Temple Sinai in Dresher, Pennsylvania as USY advisor and co-teacher. Get the pictures.
We'll do it after.
Working with teens and staffing USY trips to Israel, you found your passion and learned the importance of experiential and informal education. At Adath Jeshurun in Elkins Park, you developed a scoped and sequenced family education program. You compiled, edited, and contributed to the book Eitz Chaim Hi, A Guide to Family Education, dedicated to your mentor, Dr. Barbara Wachs of blessed memory. As education director of Adath Israel in Marion Station, you created a school of innovation and excitement. Some of your achievements include integrating technology, involving students in real-time Shabbat experience, a collaborative Hebrew school, and an Israel Ambassador Fellowships. And thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Dr. Louis Allan Nagle.
Dr. Nagle, for more than 3 decades, as a synagogue school administrator, you have earned the esteem of your peers, clergy, colleague, and congregants. You are passionate about student-centered learning, special needs inclusion, family engagement, and the Musar tradition of ethical behavior. Through online presentations and professional development workshops, you have been a role model for teachers and are an educator's educator. Recently honored with the JEA's Lifetime Achievement Award, you have served as JEA president and as a chairman of the Greater Washington Education Directors Council. In your current position as education director at Beth Shalom Congregation in Columbia, Maryland, you helped establish the region's Teen Interfaith Initiative, a tangible expression of your highest belief in the Jewish obligation to pursue justice. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people. Thank you.
Ms. Selma R. Rothman.
Ms. Rothman, in your role as a Jewish educator, you served as principal of both the Perlman Jewish Day School in Melrose Park, Pennsylvania, and Kelman Brown Academy in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Teaching and inspiring students, teachers, and families at your own synagogue, Beth Shalom of Elkins Park, you served as education director and taught Hebrew and Parshat HaShavua classes to adults. You also planned and implemented the Shabbat Experience program with the rabbinical leadership. Currently, through Israel Dreaming, you lead and organize trips to Israel for individuals and families and groups. You are president of the Philadelphia Na'amat chapter and are chairing the Na'amat USA International Convention in Israel in November 2019. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Dr. Michael J. Schatz.
Dr. Schatz, you have been a practitioner in both formal and informal Jewish education for nearly 3 decades. A past president of the Jewish Educators Assembly, you hold degrees in education and Jewish studies, including an Ed.D. in Jewish education from Gratz College in Philadelphia, where you spent many years teaching and directing various programs in the high school, college, and continuing education departments. You have been a Ramah counselor and a Rosh Edah USY regional director and synagogue education director. You have published and presented in the areas of tefillah education and Jewish experiential education, and you have created a program of tours and lectures about the history of Jewish Philadelphia. Thank you for your service to the Jewish people.
Mrs. Susan E. Weiner.
Mrs. Weiner, or Susan, In your decades-long career in Jewish education, your greatest joy has been helping educators flourish. Recently retired from the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, you have had advanced from consultant in Jewish education, mentoring Jewish educators and leading seminars across North America, to director of learning enrichment, heading the USCJ learning team. You became the best friend to new educators around the country as director of USCJ's New Directors Institute. Previously, though, as education director of B'nai Jeshurun Congregation in Cleveland, you enhanced the curriculum to include family education, project-based learning, and Hebrew through movement. You also impacted educators graduating from Cleveland Siegel College and here at JTS's William Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education as a coach and a mentor. We are thankful for your service to the Jewish people.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for serving as a sponsor for today's honoree. I now ask all of the honorees from today to please rise and remain standing. That's good. You can do that. You are the guardians and transmitters of our Jewish heritage, bringing the light of Torah to countless people of all ages, enriching their lives and strengthening our communities. In bestowing these degrees, JTS acknowledges its debt to you, who are at once its students, its partners, and its emissaries. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, would truly be bereft and impoverished without you. We could not flourish without the kind of dedication that you epitomize. May you continue to find blessing in your endeavors and enjoy good health. May you accept this tribute as a challenge to continue with vigor and insight the work you have done with such success. And may we together be granted the privilege of seeing a world ruled by justice and compassion, serving the Almighty and seeking the Almighty, and working to fulfill God's will. In recognition of your continued devotion to your sacred task, the Board of Trustees of the Jewish Theological Seminary has voted to confer upon you these honorary doctorates. Therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in the JTS Board of Trustees by the State of New York, it is now my privilege to admit you to the degree of Doctor of Pedagogy, honoris causa. Mazal tov to you all. So the honorees may be seated, and I would now like to ask the families and friends of the honorees, parents and guests and spouses and children and partners and grandchildren, other friends and relatives, to please rise and remain standing. While we honor these distinguished educators for their contributions to Jewish life, we also honor their families who have sustained them, nourished them, and at times made sacrifices for them. That is why you, the families of these leaders, are as much a part of this celebration as they are. We honor you as we honor them. Congratulations. Families may be seated, and now I return the podium to Allan Levene.
Thank you, Chancellor Eisen. I would like to add my own personal congratulations to all of you that we've honored today. While I grew up in a very strong Jewish home and had a wonderful relationship with my rabbis, it is the Jewish educator in Middletown, New York, that lit the spark that created the Jew that is me today. He handed me the shofar to blow when I was 11. He taught me how to learn Torah. He taught me how to daven. And he's why I'm here today, actually. So I really appreciate all that you've done. I'd like to now, it's my privilege to call Ms. Catherine Berkowitz, who received an honorary degree today, to speak on behalf of all of you to all of us.
Saharayim Tovim. I would like to add my warm welcome to Chancellor Dr. Arnie Eisen, Board Chair Allan Levene, Dean Dr. Bill Robinson, JEA President Steve Kerbel, JEA Executive Director Dr. Eddie Edelstein, fellow honorees, colleagues, family members, and friends. Wow. Right? I am so excited to be here this afternoon with everyone. It is my great honor to be part of and be speaking on behalf of this distinguished group of educators who are receiving honorary degrees of pedagogy from the Jewish Theological Seminary. To be honored with my teachers, mentors, and respected colleagues makes this privilege even more special to me. It is very rewarding to be recognized by my peers and the very institution that provides us the tools to begin and then to further our careers. The cohort being honored today is deeply knowledgeable, thoughtful, and creative. It is these qualities that reflect in our passion in Jewish education. As a group, we bring years of experience in our respective roles as synagogue educators, directors of day schools, early childhood center directors, educational consultants, and of course, the Ramah camper movement. We bring valuable expertise to our constituencies, communities, and the conservative movement. Indeed, we continue to be our part to engage our youth by exciting them about what is to be Jewish and to lead them in meaningful Jewish life. I am sure each of us had a story when we received the notification about our honor. When I received the email from Chancellor Eisen this past summer, I was at Camp Ramah Rome, my second home. It was shortly after being with Friday lunch at the Beit Am, and I was heading up the hill to begin my next part of the day. When my phone started buzzing, usually I don't pay attention to my phone, but there had been a difficulty with the Wi-Fi at camp. Also, the server was down at our synagogue. And I knew I had to check my phone because I was flooded with missed emails and text messages. I decided to check my email and messages to make sure that everything was okay. It took a few moments to scan emails and texts. I came across a message from the JTS. At first, I thought it was junk mail, until I opened it and I realized it was an invitation to receive an honorary degree. I hurried up the mountain to my room, and not an easy task, I assure you. To check the email more thoroughly, it was no joke. I was really being honored, and I immediately called my mom. Hi, Mom, I know you're watching. Guess what? You finally have a doctor in the family. Shh. Fred, my husband, thinks I called him first. This past summer, my 22nd, in fact, was my last year as Rosh Chinuch at Ramah Rome. And knowing this, I took time to think about the impact Rome has had on my life as an educator and as an individual. I quickly realized that I've been doubly blessed to be to be an education director at two wonderful congregations, Beth Shalom in Memphis and B'nai Torah at Boca Raton. It was Rabbi Light, Zichrona Livracha, who encouraged me my creativity and exist outside of the box. He knew that allowing me to experiment and with immersive experiential approaches to teaching would be good for the families of our small congregation, as well as my personal growth as an educator. For the past 14 years, Rabbi Steinhardt and Rabbi Englander have continued to nurture and support this innovative style of teaching that has enabled me to bring meaningful educational opportunities to our families and synagogue community. I am honored that Rabbi Steinhardt is here with me today. And while reflecting, I thought about my mentors, Rabbi Lawrence Sykes, who advised me during my early years at Ramah Rome and continues to that advisory after he's moved on. And Lana Picker, who 25 years ago told me I was ready to direct a synagogue school. And she's always a phone call away. I find myself smiling and thought how proud they might be of me today. I am sure each of us has people. Each of us have people who have touched our lives, and as then that I became more certain of what I truly wanted to share with you today. The Talmud asks the question, who is wise? And it gives a surprising answer. Someone who learns from everyone. We recognize humility in ourselves when by finding something we can learn from others. Do you hear them? Are you paying attention? There's something you can learn from everyone, something that only he or she knows and that only he or she can teach you. This text brings in mind a poem from Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, whom I first met at Clark University in the early 80s. Before Camp Ramad Rome started using its current Siddur, Sim Shalom, it had a Siddur that we created for Kabbalat Shabbat. Of course, all camps have a Siddur that they've created. Inside, just after you turn past the dedication page, is the following poem entitled Jigsaw by Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. It must have been a time when you entered a room and met someone, and after a while you understood that unknown to either of you, there was a reason you had met. You had changed the other, and the other had changed you. By some word or deed, or just by your presence, the errand had been completed. Then perhaps you were a little bewildered or humbled and grateful. It was over. Each lifetime is comprised of pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and some there are more puzzles. For others, the puzzle is more difficult to assemble. Some seem to be born with nearly completed puzzle, and so it goes on. So souls go this way out, trying to assemble the myriad parts. But know this, like before the days when you used a sealed jigsaw puzzle and cellophane, ensuring that all the pieces were there. No one has within themselves all the pieces to their puzzle. Everyone carries with them at least one, and probably many pieces to someone else's puzzle. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. And when you present your piece to another, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, you are a messenger from Most High. By now, some of you are nodding your head. You understand what Kushner is teaching us, or you've heard the poem before, or you've actually experienced this firsthand. Then let me ask you, who are the people who have held important pieces of your jigsaw puzzle? For those puzzles, have you carried their pieces? Each of us continues to lead our own journey, and as Jewish educators, we have received many puzzle pieces throughout our personal and professional lives. When I stop to think about the many teachers and students with whom I have exchanged puzzle pieces, some who are here today, and I am by far and greatly humbled. This afternoon, we appreciate the puzzle pieces from our students who constantly challenge us to teach, to respond, and to interact in new ways to meet their needs. We watch them and support them. They teach us so much. Every day, every moment. They inspire us with their life stories. Our students are reminders that the work we chose was right for all of us. We have the opportunity to be part of the Jewish journey, which is a great honor and a wonderful puzzle piece for us. And the puzzle pieces from our teachers, who gave us strength to grow and become more than we thought was possible. Because we could feel your support, we knew you were behind us every step of the way. You're the ones that laughed with us and felt the growing pains too. You've taught us to learn from our mistakes and to continue to push forward. You listened, reassured, tugged at our reins sometimes or two, and always made us feel that we were right where we needed to be. Indeed, you invested in us to be the agents of change we hope to become. And the puzzle pieces to our rabbis, colleagues, and mentors who believed in us and empowered us to do the amazing things that we're able to do. You paved the way and partnered with us so we could grow the leaders we are here today. And the puzzle pieces from our friends and family who love us and encourage us to pursue our dreams. Without you, we may not be where we are today. You help us to achieve our goals and support us when we make new ones, no matter how crazy they may seem to be, and even when you don't understand them. You keep us anchored and make us laugh. You have always been and continue to be our biggest fans. We look forward to all the exciting adventures to come. There are many more puzzle pieces to be given and to be received. Today, I give my colleagues who are here with me receiving the Honorary Doctorate of pedagogy, a puzzle piece of my own to show how honored and proud I am to be here on this stage with you. May you continue the joy of exchanging puzzle pieces, and may you continue to inspire a commitment to meaningful, lifelong Jewish engagement and education. Thank you.
The chancellor's left, but I think I can get away with saying this. No, in May, we have commencement, and we award degrees, and we award honorary degrees, and we honor people that have made contributions to Judaism, to the American life, but these honorary degrees that we award today are to honor people that are dedicated to continuity of Jewish life in America. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So the next part of this afternoon's celebration is 2 floors down. We are in a capital campaign and a building project. If any of you want to leave a check at the door for our capital campaign, we will not cash it until tomorrow morning. But the celebration will be downstairs. We'll have drinks, and all of us can mingle and congratulate the honorees. Just be seated until we finish this processional or recessional, I'm not sure what it's called, but we'll see you all downstairs, and thank you very much for coming.